Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another round of Mind Your Fucking Business with your host, Jeffrey Kuntzman.
Thank you, Dougie Sticks, coming to you from the beautiful studios of Undefeated Media here in Bergen County, New Jersey. This is the Mind Your Fucking Business podcast brought to you by the Bamboozle Project along with DraftKings. We thank them both for their sponsorship. Encourage you to go to thebamboozleproject.com, all one word, shop a wide variety of MYPB gear, and you can use promo code MYPB at checkout and save 20% off your entire order. We thank them for that. We thank all of you guys that have been buying up our stuff. We greatly appreciate it. We thank DraftKings as always. This is episode 198, so 198. So if you're following us, and you know what? Normally,
you're not even rusty.
You know what? Normally, I'm cheating by telling you this, that I actually will say it once or twice ahead of time. I haven't even said it until that.
Wow.
So the fact that was as smooth as it was is an absolute miracle.
Maybe with some of the places you've been to help you practice.
You know what? Maybe being in the Dominican Republic last week did help. Maybe that is it. Maybe. You can send us your questions at any time. You can DM us at Mind Your Fucking Business on Instagram. We are always there. We are there 365 days a year. If it's a leap year, which it's not, we would be there 366 days a year, but you can get to us at any time. We always respond. You can watch today's episode live, and we're taping it on Wednesday, July 9th, just so you know if you're streaming it, when were we talking, what point in time. You can listen to the show live on YouTube and Instagram, and I can see that the YouTube crowd is already blowing up the chat that we started a couple minutes late. I am sorry, guys, but we are here. It is my own fault because I was showing the guys here some stuff, some videos, because we haven't been here in a couple weeks. You can also stream it at your convenience on iTunes and Spotify. So we are glad to be back. Scott, I could see, man, I missed you guys. We missed you too. We have not been on. It has been just a busy time of work year for me. There's also, aside from last week, not a ton of Ranger stuff going on. And as I always say, I don't want to come here and just talk about nonsense. It's not fair to you guys. If we're going to put out content, we have to have stuff that's worthy of putting out content. And today we do, because there's been some Ranger stuff going on. So we do wish you had a good end of school year. If you're a kid, if you're a college student, I know we have a lot of college students that listen to us. Or if maybe you're a parent and you have kids that at the end of the school year, or any were graduating like my two happened to do, we hope that all went smoothly. I hope summer is good. I hope you had a good 4th last Friday. And we will get into some Ranger hockey. And let's go back first to a couple weeks ago. The last time we were on was June 6th. And that may seem, well, actually, was it? No, it was June 4th, Wednesday, June 4th. And at that time, really the only move that had been made on an offseason kind of thing for the Ranger front was that Peter Laviolette had been dismissed, which was kind of not a surprise, and also not a surprise that if Mike Sullivan was going to be let go by Pittsburgh, which he was, that he probably would become a coach of the Rangers. And he did. So let's get up to speed from when we were there last. So we're dealing with a slate where really the only difference in the New York Ranger roster at that point was Mike Sullivan is in, Peter Laviolette is out. The following week, now that episode, and there is a clip of this on Instagram. So if you didn't see us talk about it, it is up there. But we saw, you will go on there and you will see that there is a clip of me saying why the Rangers need to trade Chris Kreider. Okay, they need to go up there and trade Chris Kreider. There's no reason for him to be on the roster. Look, and a lot of you wrote this to us, I have no inside sources. It's not like I knew they were going to trade Chris Kreider like you. You knew it was possible. I had no inside sources. So the fact that coincidentally it happened a week later after that clip is just completely coincidental. I had zero to do with anything or even knew anything. But the argument is Chris Kreider needed to be traded, and we talked about this on the show, because you can't be paying someone $6.5 million against what is already a tight salary cap to be putting up the sort of statistics that he put up in that season. All right. Next, the following week comes, and he goes out and he is traded to Anaheim. He is traded to Anaheim, and Anaheim is willing, once again, similar to the Jacob Trouba deal, where Jacob Trouba went, to not only take a Ranger player who probably shouldn't be on the roster, but also take all of the salary too. So there were a lot of people that are upset about Chris Kreider trade, and there still are. Like, I see people in the comments still every day, like, it's tough to follow. How am I going to deal without Chris Kreider? Well, how am I going to live my life? If you want to be upset that the Rangers traded Chris Kreider, you can be upset that the Rangers traded Chris Kreider because you have some sort of player loyalty to him. I don't personally, but if you want to have that angle and play that card, that's totally fine. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. But it's not okay to me to be upset that if you're upset that Chris Kreider was traded because you think that him not being on the roster lowers the chances or the probability, which probably isn't high to begin with, but lowers the probability that the Rangers have a chance to be better next year and win a Stanley Cup, because it doesn't. I don't understand the argument that if you think that what you saw this year, and I think it was a total of 30 points, I haven't looked in a couple of weeks, but I think that's what Chris Kreider had last year. If you think that not bringing back a player who had 30 points that's counting $6.5 million against your cap is going to hurt your chances of winning the Stanley Cup, I don't know what to tell you. Remember, this is a business first, all right? This is always what it is, and it's a business move. They have a better chance of winning not having a player counting $6.5 million against the cap with the statistics he did. It's as simple as that. It really is.
So can I address, maybe you could say it's an elephant in the room. We you like a quote. So there's some people, I'm not calling anyone out. I had a nice conversation. I was over at TS Ma and I was talking to yeah, that's great. We're getting some technical difficulties over here. All right. So long story short, I was talking with Chris Ma, and he's a little we have these moves, and like you said, these are business moves. We're trying to make the team better by any means possible, and I get that. But do you think that these moves are affecting team morale? Chris is under the impression that players aren't showing up like we saw last year, and they're really quote unquote butthurt that they're trading their friends or they're doing moves that, like, I'm supposed to have a no trade clause, and here I am getting traded. Like,
yeah. So Chris is right, and Chris at TS Ma, we say hello, best Chinese food in the tri-state area. He is right in the sense that there were some player morale issues. There obviously was stuff going on. We're not in it, the locker room, so we're only going to guess off what we know, which is very minimal to the whole realistic picture. But I would think Chris Kreider was involved in that morale issue, would be my guess, and that could also be another reason if you want to make the argument. Again, I understand why people are upset that Chris Kreider got traded, because you like Chris Kreider, and for a lot of you that follow us, and I mean this in a positive way, you're a lot younger than me. So you've only known your Ranger fandom as having Chris Kreider, and he has been an integral piece of that and the core of where your memories are of following this team. Mm-hmm. But you cannot tell me in any way possible that this team is better off having a player that is counting $6.5 million against your cap at scoring 30 points a year. It's a business first. The team is better off without Chris Kreider. I don't understand the argument other than the sense you like him as a player, which is fine. But the goal here is to win, not to put, fan favorites on a roster.
Yeah. And now I'll even go Remsanity. Now I'll go flip side and completely agree with you, is like, you just had a whole year to prove that you can be a leader and keep the morale up and be that guy. And you chose to take, the other route. So even more reason why we should get rid of you.
Yeah. So I look in recap, and I see all you guys putting your comments on Instagram as well as YouTube about it. And it seems like most of you are in agreement. In recap, the trade had to be done. We said they needed to trade him before he was traded. So obviously we were going to be happy with it. There was a post up 6 days earlier of us telling you he needed to be traded. So we wish Chris, I mean, you can't wish any ill will on the guy. I mean, I don't, sometimes players get traded and you sit there and, they get traded for reasons that you don't like the guy and you wish them bad. I don't wish Chris Kreider bad luck in Anaheim, and I think he'll probably actually do well out there. He's got Joel Quenneville. He's got a bunch of young talent out there. He's probably will have a decent year. Is he going to have a 50-goal season like Chris Kreider did years ago? No. but he's probably going to have a better year than he did last year.
Mhm.
But for this situation here in New York, where we cover it, he needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
So July 1st comes last week. Now, for those of you that follow us on Instagram, you know I was out of the country from the videos we had up. And one thing was apparent, and it was true. This was not a free agent year where, like, and the example I always use, and Chris, who's watching, is going to love this, like 2019 when Artemi Panarin signs with the Rangers, it wasn't going to be a year where the Rangers were going to make a massive free agent splash. There wasn't. This is not the year of a great free agent class. Next year in 2026 is, and we'll get to that a little later in the show with a gentleman who plays up in Edmonton. But it wasn't going to be anything major. The day before, on June 30th, you guys were DMing, hey, what do you think is going to happen? And I posted a video, a quick story, and I gave you 3 predictions. I said Cuylle won't be re-signed in time by the time free agency opens tomorrow, 12:01. They'll trade K'Andre Miller, and they'll sign Gavrikov, who, was been rumored like, we knew this was going to happen for months. All 3 of them came to fruition. Now, let's start with Cuylle. Cuylle was not signed in time. I'm surprised at that. You had months to get this deal done and didn't do it. But at the end of the day, he was signed about 4:30, 4.5 hours after free agency opened. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Now, where I think some people will disagree, Will Cuylle is a very important piece of this team. Will Cuylle was probably last year in what might have been the worst season of being a Ranger fan I can remember in 30 years, just because of the sense that they had talent and just didn't play well. Will Cuylle probably was, like, you could tell me what player was the bright spot of a terrible season. It probably was Will Cuylle. I don't even know what other answer you could give me, to be honest. But I wanted Will Cuylle to stay. But I also don't think it would have been catastrophic if some other team offer sheeted him a crazy amount of money and he left. Like, it's not, Will Cuylle is not going to make the difference whether the team wins the Stanley Cup or not. But he's helpful to have. I love Will Cuylle. I'm happy he's back. What I like more about him being back was the deal that he signed, because in typical Ranger sense, you would think that they would overpay for him, right? Guy had a good year, a young player. They'll throw more money at him than he needs to be. Getting him on a 2-year deal at $3.5 million is a very team-friendly deal, to the fact that I was like shocked. I would have thought he would have gone. And also, the other reason I thought he was going to get more money is he hadn't been signed up until the start of free agency, where he could have been. So there had to have been some sort of discontent there between him and the Rangers. So to see him come in at 3.9 is a very team-friendly deal. Now, one thing with Will Cuylle, and I said this, and it's nothing against him. Will Cuylle has gotten a lot of attention for 2 reasons. One, the rest of the team was atrocious last year. So your biggest bright spot is going to shine when darkness covers 98% of the other parts of the season. Mm-hmm. Will Cuylle also started off really good, but if you look at his stats at the end of the year, it wasn't great. I am not saying it was terrible, but he did kind of like come back to earth. So 2 years, 3.9 for Will Cuylle is a very good deal. And that 2-year window gives you time to see what was the real Will Cuylle. Is the real Will Cuylle what we saw the first third to half of the season last year, where he was great? Or was it more where he came back and maybe he was a flash in the pan? So kudos to Chris Drury on getting that deal done and getting it done in the way that he did. Now, K'Andre Miller, where do I want to start here? All right. I had gotten to a point, and I apologize for this. I was torn on K'Andre Miller to do. I had no problem with them trying to trade him, but I also understood the argument that the free agency class wasn't good. And K'Andre had good years here. Last year, he was atrocious. But if you wanted to bring him back on a 1-year deal, a short-term deal, I could live with it. I wouldn't. I was fine either way, right? But I also, and I said this in the video the day before free agency opened, you're not going to give him away for nothing, right? This is not just, it wouldn't be an open, a blank check, but it's not like, here, you can have him give us back a box of Cracker Jacks. No, because he's still technically a young defenseman. So free agency opens up, and really, I would say by 12:40, so 40 minutes into free agency, there are multiple reports that the Rangers are going to trade him to Carolina. first instinct for me is I am surprised that they traded him within the division, and because Carolina, of course, plays in the Metropolitan Division along with the Rangers. Was I shocked at it? Does it really bother me? No, but I was surprised. That was my first instinct. But then you sat there for hours, and all of the beat reporters who cover this stuff, nobody knew what the return was, right? So, okay, pretty definitively, like you probably could bet on it because you're reading it everywhere from all these NHL writers, that K'Andre Miller has been traded to Carolina. But you don't know what's coming back. And that, to me, in any deal, obviously, is equally as important. So it's not, okay, well, we got rid of K'Andre, let's celebrate. Again, I'm not trying to get rid of him for nothing. I need to know what is coming back. And what is coming back for him is a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a young defensive prospect. If you've read up on him, and I don't want to pretend that I knew who he was when he was traded because I don't, but I've done some research on him, and it does sound potentially promising. A young defensive prospect of Scott Morrow, who I believe played his collegiate hockey up at UMass. Now, when I saw later that day, we were in the Dominican Republic. When I saw the return come across, a first, a second, and a defensive prospect, I actually thought, I don't remember where I saw it. I don't know if someone texted it to me. I don't know if someone DM'd it. I honestly don't remember. But I remember thinking that it wasn't real, right? Because how in the world could you trade a guy who, again, I used the word before, I'll use it again. I just said it 5 minutes ago. Atrocious last year was the word I used. And that may even be putting it mildly. How in the world you give a player, you trade a player like that, who also may not come back here, right? He's also an RFA. Now, granted, an offer sheet, you would get something as compensation. But here's a guy that possibly could leave on his own if he wants as an RFA. And you bring back a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a decent defensive prospect. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. How is anyone unhappy with this? It's mind-boggling to me. Now, the Rangers could, of course, in typical Ranger fashion, screw up the first-round pick, screw up the second-round pick, and screw up the development of this prospect, Scott Morrow. That would be the typical Ranger way, right? But we don't know that's going to happen yet. I'm not going to go down that road. The fact that Chris Drury got a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a young defensive prospect, anybody who has complained about Chris Drury this year, and maybe you've had your moments where you can, this is not one of them. It's not.
Wow.
I honestly do not understand how they got all of that back. So I thought, and we had posted a video about this too, that, when you look at this deal and the general manager, Eric Tolsky down there, there is a video that the NHL did, and it's really cool. You should watch it. We posted it. It was in our story, but you could find it, where they posted insight into their front office when they were making the trade. So you hear Eric Tolsky, the general manager down there, on the phone, Chris Drury. You hear parts of the discussion. I don't know. And they're talking about how physical K'Andre Miller is. I mean, I'm watching this and I'm like, what? Look, I'm not an evaluator of talent. I'm a Ranger fan, but I'm not I don't do this for a living. I mean, how are you going to sell anyone that K'Andre Miller was physical?
Well, I mean, if we pull up Scud's comments, Scud apparently has a quote from Johnny Lazarus comparing him to the Jack Eichel of defense in terms of the amount of skill he has.
So I like Johnny Lazarus's take because Johnny Lazarus is a UMass guy. So if anyone's going to know anything about Scott Morrow, it would be him. Whether he's the Jack Eichel on the defensive end, look, I have no idea. I hope Johnny's right. But I do know that Johnny would be someone that would know a thing or two about Scott Morrow. I'm sure he knows far more than most people have, and he's seen him play. So when you see the return, I'm lost. I mean, I am lost. It is, to me, it is a one-sided deal. If you think that, and it's fair to think this, that K'Andre is going to now do really well in Carolina and come back to haunt the Rangers, let me ask you this. Exactly what and I've tried to think of this, so maybe there's an answer here. But how would as a defenseman, and we know K'Andre Miller, how is he going to come back and haunt you? He's not going to be Adam Fox. He's not going to put up a ton of points. Maybe he cuts down on his turnovers in a different system under Rod Brindamore down in Carolina. But exactly, give me a scenario where he comes back and haunts you. What do? They play the Rangers in March maybe, and he scores the overtime winner on a game in March, and That still doesn't mean that the deal was a bad deal. Like, I don't know how he can come back and haunt you. And then, as a Double Fly is saying on Instagram, and this should be mentioned too, it's a good point. On top of the stupidity of Carolina making this deal, they then go out and give him $7.5 million every year for the next 8 years.
Yeah.
How what are you seeing?
What are you watching?
What are you seeing in Keandre
What
Miller?
season were they watching?
To tell me.
Did they put it in the wrong DVD?
To tell me that Keandre Miller, in your eyes, is an NHL defenseman not only worth $7.5 million a year, which is a joke, but then confident that he's going to be worth $7.5 million for the next 8 years. What are you thinking?
Let me, like, all jokes aside, when I say wrong DVD, was there a season that if you watch the season, would he be like his first season, his second season was stellar? Like, is there a season or a section of work that would be warranted that?
No.
The COVID year?
No.
Ryan says the COVID year.
But he's not even in Keandre's best year. And look, Keandre is better than he was last year. I'm not saying that that's what you're going to get. I mean, if Carolina gets the Keandre from last year for 8 years and $7.5 million, that would be the fleece of the century. That might be better than the Ryan McDonough for Scott Gomez trade. For Ranger fans who've been around a while, that would remember that. I mean, that would be a joke. I mean, the whole thing's a joke as it is.
So if he gets similar stats to last year, that will go down in history for best Ranger trade, top 5 Ranger trades of all time.
Look,
top 10.
It's definitely top 10.
Top fleecing.
I mean, I'm talking like fleecing.
It's the top fleecing of all time.
And then on top of it, you make the trade, and then you sign him for $7.5 million for 8 years. Have you watched any film of the Ranger games last year? Do you remember opening night? I remember the home opener, the Saturday night game against Utah. He turned the puck over or behind the net in overtime. They lost. The Dallas game, they lost on his turnovers. There was so much mental regression that to give a guy, forget that you traded for him. That's also terrible. Even if he was a free agent, a UFA, and Carolina says, I'm going to give you $7.5 million for 8 years because I like what I've seen. I'm lost. And then again, the reality is not only am I giving you $7.5 million for 8 years, I'm also saying I believe in you so much that to be able to give that right, I'm going to give up a first and a second round pick and a young defensive prospect. That dude should be fired. What is going on?
Well, your post said it all, or the story that you put up of someone else's post, whatever, when it was like, I can give you this, that, and the other thing. It cuts to those guys in the radio. Like, I'll laugh at
yeah. So there was a video. I don't want to get in trouble. Like, I don't want to rip other people. That's not really what we do. Yeah. There is a video we posted on our story last week from 99.9 Sports Radio in Carolina. And the day after the trade, there's a host. And if you didn't see it and you want to see it, you can DM us. I'll send it to you because I have it. But there's a host of the Carolina Sports Radio that is talking about the trade. And he's talking about how the Keandre Miller trade was phenomenal. It's making Carolina so much better. And then he kind of gets into like a bullet points of why Keandre Miller works in Carolina. And it was like, hey, if you're not familiar with Keandre Miller because he played in New York, let me tell you about Keandre Miller. And he's sitting there talking about him, and you're like, he's not talking about the same dude. He's absolutely not talking about the same dude. He's physical. He uses his body. He's smart in the defensive end. Bro, have you watched any? What are you watching?
You need to reshare the other post I'm talking about where Eric is in the office. He's like, I can offer you a first and second. And it cuts to those guys in the studio just busting out laughing.
That clip comes from the Instagram page of Broadway Block, another Ranger page. But I don't know. Like, I also think to myself how frustrated I would be if the Rangers were on the other side of what I view as such a one-sided deal. If the Rangers made a trade for someone, like we gave up a first, a second, and a defensive prospect, Othman or someone like that, and said, all right, we're trading for this guy. Now I'm going to also cripple my cap and sign him for 8 years at $7.5 million. I literally would lose my mind. I would be so angry. And the fact that you're now sitting on the other side of the deal, thankfully on the right side of the deal, anyone who complains about Chris Drury, and there's been other things. Look, Chris Drury hasn't been perfect. There's no general manager that has. But how in the world you would be upset about the K'Andre Miller trade is beyond me. And there really haven't been people. Now, one thing I will say, and I said this in the story we posted about it, the one part of the K'Andre Miller deal that is a little sad is the fact that this was a homegrown product, right? That he was drafted before he even came out of the University of Wisconsin. He was, first round pick. He had years here in his first few years where you did see glimpses at times. I'm going to be fair and objective, where you did see parts of his game where you said, look, he's young. If he continues to develop and the Rangers develop him the right way, which of course they wouldn't do anyway because they don't know how to do that, can actually turn out to be a good player for us down the road. And it was a homegrown kid drafted. That aspect, to give up on that is frustrating, but it is the right move, especially when you see, like someone willing to pay. Could you imagine? Now, he's an RFA, right? Could you imagine if the Rangers put out a press release last Tuesday, July 1st? We've decided to re-sign K'Andre Miller
can't even finish the sentence.
at $7.5 million for 8 years. This entire fan base would riot. There would be.
But what would you have done?
What would I have done?
Would you have came here immediately and done an episode?
Well, first off, I was in the Dominican Republic. So
you take a private jet directly here?
No. If I saw K'Andre Miller signed by the Rangers last week to a $7.5 million contract for 8 years. Let me because I was in the Dominican Republic, I'm going to use it in terms of that because that's where I was.
Yeah, we want a live, real scenario here. You're there.
I would have been highly enraged.
Would you have to leave the family for an hour or so and like cool down?
Yes.
I need to take a walk.
100%. There were times. So I was telling B-Rock, and I feel terrible about this. There's a video of this. We were in the DR, and now July 1st, because free agency opens is terrible. Okay. So it's like 12:40. The only thing that has come out is that there was a rumor somewhere that they traded K'Andre. I decided at 12:40 to go get lunch, and we're at an all-inclusive. So, you could walk into the buffet whenever you want. You don't need reservations. My wife and we decided to go without kids, and we literally, this is just amazing timing. We were walking to the restaurant, which is no longer than a 2.5 minute walk. And right as we're walking, the Gavrikov is signed, which we didn't even get to yet, and K'Andre Miller. And you'll see, I didn't even eat lunch. I was sitting at the table dealing with this. So it's fine, but I would have lost my mind. My day would have been ruined if I saw the Rangers re-sign K'Andre Miller for $7.5 million at 8 years. 100%.
We want to hear from you guys too. So put in the comments section, what would have you done in the moment that you were at, where you were at? What have you done if they signed K'Andre 7.5 for 8 years?
Correct.
Your reactions, please.
Now, the other thing that the Rangers did that day is sign Vladimir Gavrikov from Los Angeles, who's a defenseman. I would I'd be lying if I told you I knew a lot about him before he was linked to the Rangers. I don't know how there's not tampering here, by the way. Not that I'm trying to get the Rangers in trouble, but how was this rumored to happen? And everyone around the league even said they thought he was going to go to the Rangers. Well, how would you know that if the parties hadn't spoken? But he technically was still under contract. Anyway, Gavrikov signing was not bad. I totally expected that they would overpay for him. But they did not. And I also expected that they would give him like a total as a whole a ridiculous contract. And they didn't do that. So I'm okay with it. Look, I'm going to temper some of the expectations. I think because the free agency class was weak, Gavrikov's name is a lot higher on list because it's a year where there's not a lot out there. But there is also, a part of him where you need a left pair D to play with Adam Fox, right? Someone consistently. He will fit that bill. He will be given a chance. I'm sure that's where the organization thinks he's going to play, in that spot, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not against it, but I'm okay with it. Like, I'm not racing out to my Chinese website to go get a jersey, Gavrikov. I'm not going to do that. But all right, like, I'm okay with it. They didn't overpay. So Zach Jones, also a couple little housekeeping. Zach Jones goes to Buffalo. We all know how I feel about Zach Jones. We don't need to replay that. You can go look at the clips of that. So let's do a recap of the organizational changes. So the Rangers skate off the ice in Sam Rosen's final game on April 17th.
Yeah.
What has changed since then?
Decent amount.
Decent amount. Who is in? Gavrikov, Scott Morrow in the trade with K'Andre Miller, Radish, Malcolm Spence, who they drafted, Derek Pouliot, Justin Dowling, and Mike Sullivan in as a coach. Who is out and not coming back? Kubel, Arthur Kaliev, who signed up in Ottawa, Zach Jones is up in Buffalo, Chris Kreider's out in Anaheim, K'Andre is in Carolina, and Peter Laviolette is out. So those are your roster changes.
Mm-hmm.
Who's been signed to extensions? The great one, Matthew Rempe, signed to an extension, which I should mention because that happened between now and our last show.
Mm-hmm.
We all know I cannot stand Matt Rempe. I do not.
Really?
I can't. Even if I see, if I see like a video of him or anything, I just get annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this: at the contract they signed him for less than $1 million, it doesn't hurt anything. Like, it's fine. Had they overpaid for Matt Rempe, I would have literally lost my mind. But at least it's good to see that the organization thinks of Matt Rempe like we think of Matt Rempe. Like, he's a $900,000 a year player.
So you're happy with it?
I'm not happy with it, but I can live with it. I'm not unhappy.
So you can live with it?
Yeah, Matt Rempe.
You can live with Matt Rempe?
I can live with Matt Rempe.
You like Matt Rempe now?
No. He needs to not deal with the penalties.
Okay.
So extensions are Matt Rempe, Will Cuylle, Adam Edstrom, and Matthew Robertson. What would be left to do in the offseason? Because, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. It's July 9th. You're about to go into the darkest 2 months of hockey, which is July and August. It's not that nothing happens, but it's not as busy. These are the darker months. But what should happen before the Rangers' first preseason game, which is September 22nd at the Devils?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're going to see a lot more happen. I know there are some people out there, Chris, that want Artemi Panarin traded. I don't think that's going to happen, and that's not me talking because I don't want him traded. I just don't think he's going to be traded. I don't think Chris Drury is done making moves, but I don't think you're going to see anything major. I don't think Mika Zibanejad is waiving his no-move clause. For those of you who want him out of here, I don't even think it's a reason to even talk about it because I don't think he's waiving his no-move clause. I think you're set up in net and with Igor and Quick. On the back end, you have Schneider, you have Gavrikov, you have Fox, you have, I guess you could try and figure out who your sixth defenseman is right now. Maybe is it Vakanainen or is it Soucy? I mean, maybe Soucy moves. I don't think you're going to get a lot more movement. I don't think there's going to be a lot going on. I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, the Rangers, I'm sure every day are trying to figure out ways to make their roster better, as every team is. But I think really what you see right now for the most part is what you're going to have on your opening night roster. And then once you know definitively that that's your rosters, that this is what your roster is going to be, what we'll do in September is try and figure out like where are people playing. Because I will say this, there is a lot of, you could go a million different ways with the lines. Like there's not a set first line where you're like, well, this is definitively the top line center, the top line right wing, and the top line left wing. Like, no. Where's Zibanejad playing? Is he going on the wing? Where's Lafreniere going? He's got to have a better year. Are they starting Gabe Perreault? Where's he going? I mean, there's a lot of lineup questions that they're going to have to answer. And you can almost rest assured that when the season starts, they're not going to get it right because it's trial and error, right? You can always move the lines around, but there's a lot of ways to figure things. And thank you, Matt. I want to hear more about Jeff's team leading Division 9 points at my inline team. And Chris wrote about that up there also. We're not talking about beer league, but thank you guys. maybe we'll get some guests from my beer league team.
Of beer league?
No, not me. Chris wanting to keep Panarin is silly. So why don't we put that up? So here's the argument before we move on to some other stuff.
Your whole household's going to be pissed off.
There you go. Right. Well, my wife would be pissed. The argument in trading Panarin, which is there, I get it, is he's going to be a free agent next year. He doesn't produce in the playoffs. You can get something back for him now. Fair. Mm-hmm. Absolutely correct. That's all factual data. However,
but the big question is, what would you get back?
Well, no, the question to me is, where are you going to get? What are you getting back? Where are you? What are you getting? Well, hold on. Now let me finish. What are you getting back that's replacing the 90 points he had last year or 120 the year before? Something has to come back to to replace that point total.
What is out there that's worth coming back?
Oh, well, it's not just worth coming back that can have an immediate impact. Because if you take 90 points off your team,
tomato.
No, if you take 90 points off your team,
and
you're replacing it with someone who's not ready to replace 90 points, you better find a way to get 90 points next year somewhere.
Yeah. So that's my point. Who's got 90 points last year? Who's our prospect? If you were in charge, who would you eyeball that you could get back for a Panarin?
Who would I get back from Panarin?
Realistically, who could you get back for a Panarin?
I mean, I could say Billy Dow, but no one will know who that is. I would say
is that the MVP of beer league.
That is the MVP of beer league. I would say no. There's no one you're going to get back. So I don't think you're trading Panarin. Again, I understand the logic of it, but I don't think you're going to do it. Florida wins the Stanley Cup again. That happened since we were on last. Look, I think it's so hard to repeat in the NHL. I think it's hard to repeat in any sport. I think it's harder in the NHL. What is also impressive is Florida 2 years ago went to the Cup Finals. They've been in the Stanley Cup Finals for 3 years in a row, playing hockey deep into June. I mean, it's just, look, you can hate Florida, go for it, but that is impressive. You got to give them credit. And they've re-signed Marchand, they've re-signed Bennett, Ekblad. They're gonna be good again next year. I mean, look, how Florida is not the Stanley Cup favorite next year, either them or Edmonton. I mean, you could easily be getting a cup repeat for the third year in a row. The NHL the other day announced, and this is not getting a lot of credit because if it didn't happen, you'd be screaming if it didn't happen in time. The NHL announced that they've already agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement when the current one expires at the end of next offseason. Now, why does that matter now? Here's why it matters now. Because if you got to the end of next year and it wasn't in place, you'd have a lockout, which is exactly, as a sport fan, the worst thing that can happen to a sport you like. You now know you have a plan in place to avoid lockouts for the foreseeable future, and they got the deal done a year early, is great. Now, the biggest difference, and I'm going to be biased here as a Ranger season ticket holder, instead of playing 82 games, and this doesn't start this season, it'll start next year in 2026, 2027, is that there will be 84 games versus 82. Why does that matter? It matters for me because there's now 2 home preseason games and not 3, and the Rangers don't stick me with it paying full price for 3 preseason games. They only stick me for 2. So for me, I like it. And the more, look, if you're going to have the players play, I'd rather it be a regular season game anyway. I mean, I'll watch preseason, but I'll watch it. The contract length maximum is now down to 7 years, so you cannot sign a player for more than 7 years. So, Andre Miller, congratulations. If you had signed your contract next year, you couldn't sign for 8 years. Again, I keep coming back to how stupid that thing is. I mean, and the LTIR, long-term injury loophole that Vegas is the one that this was done for, has been able to take advantages of some of the loopholes in the LTIR. That is now closed. Last thing, this is just a fun thing, but it's in there with the CBA, is there is no more dress code. So if you notice, like after games when the Rangers travel, like the Rangers do a good job, although the pictures are pretty repetitive. Like they'll go on road trips and you'll see them boarding their Delta flight, walking up the stairs. Players are always in suits. Like it's the dress code. It's obviously was part of the collective bargaining. There is no more dress code.
Wow.
Which I think is cool. So like you could see Mika, you could
trendy outfits now.
You could see Igor like boarding the Delta plane in like neon sweatpants and a gangsta, dollar sign chain. Like I mean, would be pretty
swag.
Cool.
We got swag now, dude.
Would be pretty cool. So good on the NHL getting that done. All right, I wanted to address, because we got some stuff about this, Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid, next year, not this year, at the end of the 2025-2026 season, so next July 1st, if, and I'm putting that if in parentheses, is not re-signed by Edmonton between now and then, will be a free agent. There was a report, I don't remember who said it, it might have been Elliot Friedman, but it was someone around him, like that crowd of people, that said, if Connor McDavid becomes a free agent, I would expect him to go to like one of these 4 teams, right? And of course, as you would expect, One of those 4 teams was the New York Rangers. I want to say Chicago was on there. I don't remember the other ones. In any event, I would be shocked. I'm not talking about playing on the Rangers. I would be shocked. Like, I mean, if Connor McDavid was not signed by July 1st as an extension in Edmonton, Edmonton would do whatever they need to do to sign him. He's loved up there. He's not, also one other thing. His personality, if you've ever watched him, like off the ice, is so dry and boring. He would not survive in the New York media market at all. Like, he wouldn't. So I don't think he's attracted to the spotlight, the bright lights of the city, like some of you may think he is, because I think that he's just a dry person. I don't think he's leaving Edmonton. I think Edmonton is the best fit for him. He kind of is off on his own. He doesn't have to deal with it. But I don't think he's coming to the Rangers. Now, if he did, I'd be first online at Modell's or Dick's Sporting Goods to buy his jersey the morning after.
You're not getting the fake one?
No, for him, I'd have to actually spend like the real $220, which I did post a picture on the story. Matt Rempe jerseys are selling at Dick's Sporting Goods for $190. If there are people that are spending $190 on a Matt Rempe jersey, can we rethink when we say the economy is having problems?
True.
Yeah. Edmonton is not a spotlight, Chris, because we don't hear the rest of us don't hear about Edmonton. The Edmonton market is not like New York City. It's not even close. I'm sure they care about hockey in Edmonton. I've been there for work. Actually, I love the city. I love the West Edmonton Mall. I actually stayed at a really cool Marriott hotel up there that had 2 ice rinks in it. They had 2 hockey rinks and a casino, and they had $2 craps. It was awesome. But there's way less pressure in Edmonton for Connor McDavid than if he came to Broadway. It isn't even close. But all right. Anything else from you, sir?
No.
So
great to have you back.
Good to be back. We will be back. So we have to talk about it again. We try to avoid coming in here and not having a lot to talk about with the Rangers, and we're getting into this kind of dog days. We do get football back in a month, so I'm sure we'll be back sooner than later. But it was good to be back. Let us know. You can DM us on Instagram your thoughts on the Keandre Miller trade, the Chris Kreider trade, the Will Cuylle extension, the Matt Rempe extension, the Gavrikov signing. Whatever you want to talk about, we're always down to talk about it. Even if it's the dog days of summer and it's 98 degrees and there's no ice anywhere, we'll talk. Yes.
Maybe they could put a restaurant or some food that we might need to go visit in the dog days. So if you have some place that we might need to check out.
That's a good one, because I took some heat. So I did a review. I was in the city, was it 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago before I went away. This place Mama's 2, which is on the Upper West Side, which I guess has got a pretty good following on social media. And it was very good. But what's happening is this. Every time we put up a food review, which is not often because I don't do them that much. I have a job. When we put them up, I'll get the most comments I get is not, oh, I agree with you, I like that food, or I don't. It's, why didn't you go to this place? You need to check out this taco spot in Brooklyn. So if you have places, if you have places that you want us to go specifically.
And I know that you go to the city every once in a while, but let's maybe find some places that are close to home.
Okay. Right. And we tape this in Bergen County. So if you're in Bergen County, Rockland County, somewhere around there, and
North Jersey, you come over the bridge, you're a commuter.
Yeah, Westchester would work, and you have kind of like these places that you think we want us to try. We'll get it done.
The best food to have while watching the game. We want to test
those out. That way you're prepared for the season.
Prepared for the season.
I like that. We thank the Bamboozle Project for their sponsorship. Go check out thebamboozleproject.com. You can check them out. They are good stuff. Use promo code MYPB at checkout. You save yourself. We thank DraftKings as always. It's good to be back here. We missed you guys. I know we talk a lot all the time, but it was good to be back. B-Rock is back in the corner. He's working. His New Jersey Devils very light on the offseason. But actually, I should mention, Don LaGreca, the radio voice for the Rangers, got the full-time play-by-play job that no one knew was available for the Devils this week. So he's been
vacant.
No, I mean, it was occupied by Bill Spalding. I don't know enough about it to know, but I didn't know that it was. So there's a recommendation: pizza from Pizza Barn. Paul, put where that is. I've heard of it. I'm just not sure where it is. But anyway, they basically,
without throwing up, Is there one highlight, Brian, that you want to say that your team has traded or done? Is there anything that you would like to brag about?
They did not re-sign.
Oh, I know where he's going to go. He hasn't said it yet. What'd you text me last night the show was going to be about?
Oh, the Dowling.
Justin Dowling was signed by the Rangers.
The
Yeah.
Devils did not extend Justin Dowling.
Yes. Okay. So the Rangers
you're
signed.
upset about that?
No, I'm very
No.
happy.
Oh, okay.
And I totally, even though we had Frank the Tank go ballistic about him, and I totally even forgot to mention it. That's how irrelevant it is. But yeah, Don LaGreca leaving Ranger Radio to go to the Devil play-by-play job. That is it for us. We thank you guys for your sponsorship, as always, the Bamboozle Project and DraftKings. We thank you guys for listening to us. Send us your messages at any time. We're always around, and we will talk to you soon.